I'm Phil with Alpha Bowhunting, and this is our new show, To the Point.
All right, welcome back to another episode of To the Point. Phil Mendoza here with Bo, and the topic of the show is going to be all about new bow selection, right? So a couple things just to give you, if you're not familiar with No Limits Archery here in Denver, what we try to do when customers are looking for a new bow is take a lot of the bias out of it, right? The marketing, the propaganda, the whatever, the things you see on the Crush hunting show or whatever, right? We try to take that stuff out because that means little to nothing to you in the back end or at the end, or your end goal, what it should be. Yeah. And one of the things that Bo and I were actually just discussing before we started recording here was it's important to know if you're a new shooter that's never shot a bow, you're looking to buy your first bow, that customer, that perspective on purchasing a bow is very different from a customer that's looking to upgrade or get something more out of their system, right? Yeah. So, Bo, I mean, you deal with a lot more customers than I do anymore. I've been doing a lot more behind-the-scenes stuff at the shop, but you're here working with people daily. And tell me when somebody comes in the shop here, what's some of the characteristics on a bow that we're trying to encourage them to look at and consider? Because if you put one of these bows in a shooting machine,
they're all going to shoot.
They're going to stack arrows, right?
Yep, exactly.
$500 bow, $1,500 bow.
It's always going to outshoot us.
100% agreed.
Yep.
So what are some of the other things when a customer comes in, what are the main 3 or 4 things that you're actually encouraging them to consider?
So biggest thing for a brand new shooter is axle-to-axle length. A lot of, for those of you that shoot a bow currently, for the most part, the longer the bow is axle-to-axle, the more stable it is. Okay, the easier it is to aim.
I agree with that 100%.
Okay, the second biggest thing that I tend to tell people to look at is the brace height. Okay, the distance from the pivoting point of the grip to the string when the bow's not at full draw. The larger that is, generally the more forgiving the bow is. And it allows the bow itself to be a very stable, forgiving platform and allows people to, especially new shooters, to kind of shorten the learning curve, so to speak, and allow them to be...
Our logo. Missed our logo for a few minutes.
Oh,
slacking. I buzzed myself on that one.
But it allows the newer shooter to generally shoot the bow well very quickly, I guess is the best way to
So some of those specs that are more forgiving to the shooter, right? Off the initial platform. Yeah. Now from a standpoint of, the one point of contact, we coach a lot of this when we're getting into form and shot sequence and grip. It's your grip, right?
Yeah, your hand is the first and last thing to give your arrows a direction. So, I mean, before you even draw the bow back, literally, as soon as you touch the bow, you've already given your arrows a direction. A lot of people don't think of it that way. Yeah. So myself personally, I'm a lot different than most. I don't overly worry about how smooth the bow is when I draw it. The back wall, which we'll talk about here in a minute, I've got my own particular style to that. But the grip is basically my number one thing. If the bow naturally sits well in my hand and I'm incredibly comfortable with it, I'm really going to entertain the idea of hunting with that bow.
So the grip, which kind of lends itself into the balance of the feel of the bow, right?
Yeah.
So those two things are almost they're not one and the same. They're very different, but they're related.
Yep.
And then, like you said, Bo, the feel, the balance, how it sits in your hand. Terminology-wise, some of these terms we'll get into more as we start talking about what gives your bow a stable feel, right? So the hold, like Bo's referring to, and the feel, some of those things are, I don't want to say advanced, they're just understanding why and where they come from. But some of the other things, it's how about when they start shooting it, right? What do they when they actually start shooting the bow? You already mentioned draw cycle a little bit.
Yeah. So how now? Granted, if I put 3 different bows in your hand, all at 70 pounds, okay, weight-wise they're 70 pounds, but they all feel differently. One bow may feel harder to draw than another bow. Right. Okay, at the exact same weight, and that refers to draw force curve. I'm not going to get into that. That's a little bit. It's real, like more of the advanced side of things. But some bows take a lot of energy to get the cams rolling over very early. Some bows it's more towards the end, and because of that location, whether it's early or end, will make a bow feel easier to draw or harder to draw.
And there's not a right or wrong answer, because like what Bo was talking about, he personally puts that draw force, or that what it feels like to draw the bow back, lower on the priority level.
Yeah.
Focuses more on grip and balance. Okay.
Yep.
Somebody else, maybe they've got a shoulder issue, and their primary reason for the new bow is specifically that, right? I
Yep.
need it to be smooth on the draw cycle all the way through.
Yep.
So those characteristics, there's trade-offs. The smoother a bow is, typically you're losing a little bit of performance. Typically, not always.
Typically, not always, yeah.
But and then on the flip side, the more aggressive it is, usually it's because it's storing more energy and it's going to give you a little
Yeah,
more
and
performance.
when we're saying performance, we're not saying specifically like arrow speeds, or excuse me, energy. When we say performance,
one of the aspects.
it's one of the aspects, but we're not. When I say this bow doesn't have the same performance as another bow, it doesn't mean it's slower or less accurate. It just may be. What's the best way for me to explain it?
Like I said,
tough.
it's complicated, but
It's
it's
very
one of the
complicated.
components of it.
Yeah.
So that's the thing with compound bows and archery. If you're a new shooter looking to get into a bow, I would say that look at less of the sexy things, right? This bow is IBO is this or it's that. Get the bow in your hand, feel it, see what it feels like. You need to be able to shoot a bow. If you can't get to a pro shop or wherever you're going to demo shoot bows and they don't let you shoot them,
Yeah.
find a place that'll let you shoot them. You're spending anywhere between $300 and $2,000 on a bow. You need to be able to cycle it, see what it feels like, see what it sounds like.
Yep.
Is this bow really loud? Now, things to take into account. Some of these bows have whisker bits to rest. Most of the demo bows, we're moving into putting that Hamsky style, the Hamsky limb-driven rest.
Yep.
We run some vapor trail rests on there as well.
Yep.
So we're really trying to put a better finished product for the overall experience, because on the sound, on the balance, on the feel, those things are important when you're demo shooting a new bow. The other thing is hand vibration, right?
Yep.
It's some of these bows buzz a little bit more than others.
Yep.
Some
Guys like that, some guys don't.
Yeah, some guys there's some bows you put a stabilizer on it, cleans it up, minimizes it.
Yep.
But all that being said, the things in our opinion to know is if you're a new shooter, it's important to shoot as many different bows as you can. Shoot, even if you think a bow's outside of your price range, shoot it, because at that point you may say, you know what, I really like that bow. I can't afford it right now, but now I know it's there. And maybe you say, I'm not even going to spend $600 starting point. I'm going to go get the $450 bow, because I'm going to save a little more money now, because I know within a year or two I want to be able to upgrade to that other bow, right? So keep everything in perspective. At the same token, and if you're a new shooter, like I said, we encourage you to not get caught up on the sexy specs. Feel, draw cycle if that's important, noise, weight, balance, all those things. So now we take it into the second step. If you're an existing shooter, and let's say you're looking to get something specific out of your system. Maybe you haven't bought a new bow for 4, 5, 6 years. And you say, man, my bow's really smooth. It's really quiet. But I'd really like to be able to shoot 50 to 60, 70 grains heavier of an arrow and still kick it at the same speed, if not faster, right?
Yeah, in some instances you can.
Yeah, so and that's one of those characteristics. Now you're looking at possibly brace height, specifics on brace height.
Yeah.
Maybe you're looking specifics on a cam design that's going to even lend itself to be more a higher performing bow.
Yeah.
And so there's those characteristics. So now you can specify one or two aspects, put those as primary, and then you can kind of let the other ones fall where they may. One of the biggest things that, and this is going to kind of lead into the next topic and our first customer question we're going to get into it on the next segment, but hopefully it's the next segment, because if we flip one more in between, right? But it's coming up. The feel of the back wall. Some customers and archers don't understand why it's important, and you need to know where it fits into the equation of so many things, right? What we're going to start with is, we've got an elite ritual here, limb stop bow. And what we mean by that is when you see the stops that are on the cam positioning to dictate where the bow stops at full draw, this one stops back on the limb. Right?
Yep. So the stop, draw the bow back. Obviously, the camera rotates. The stop's gonna rotate around, contact the limb. Okay, it's gonna give you a very solid, what most people would say a super solid back wall. But the reason for it is, you're coming onto a hard surface, okay? Something that is
Now,
literally rock
there is
solid.
usually a little bit of a rubber kind of component to this. So
Yeah.
you have a very, very little or minimal
Yeah.
feel like not resistance but movement in there once it hits that stop. Right? So
Yeah.
go ahead and draw that bow back. And I know if you're on camera watching, I mean we're
Make
gonna
sure you can see me here.
we're gonna just try to illustrate this as best we can. So when Bo's drawing this bow back, and you see the limb stops actually on this bottom one, and they're both on the other side of the bow.
I can turn.
So let's go ahead. Let's go ahead
I
and.
can turn.
So this limb, obviously, this limb stop comes back and it hits here, like you said. A couple things to consider when you're shooting this type of system. So you can go ahead and relax, Bo. This is a personal opinion, but this is also something that's coached. As you get into USA Archery and different philosophies, you want to be able to have slight expansion into your shot, right? Mm-hmm. So with a system like this, I'm going to say that this type of system lends itself well to that shooter that draws back, engages in the back wall, sits there, and shoots more like a punch or a command shot.
Yep.
Because you're not dependent on the expansion of your body and form into the shot.
Yep.
You
Yep.
can command
What-
the release to go.
What I've personally experienced demo shooting bows with limb stops. Myself personally, I'd love to shoot a hinge style release, and that that type of release I need to be able to expand through the shot. I've found with the limb stop, I start to shake, just
Tremble.
tremble,
100%
ridiculous
agree.
amount of trembling because I have nowhere to go.
So let's transition into the next model bow here. We've got a Hoyt Hyper
This
Force.
one I got stops on the other side. All right.
So you when you draw this bow back, the stops that are up here on the position of the camera, they're going to come back and they're going to contact the
Yep.
cables, okay?
Top and bottom.
And so when you go ahead and draw this bow, when you draw this system back, and these stops hit the cables, because that cable is basically made of the string material that's on there with the string, you've got a little bit of give. So go ahead and give it a little push pull in that bow, so you can kind of see that Bo's pulling hard on that back wall. You've got a little bit of give. Now that's this dramatic with how much he's pulling. You're not going to pull that much, most likely, into the back wall. So when somebody says, "Oh, that bow has a squishy back wall feel," because you're pulling into the cable stops, I argue that depending on your shooting style and your release,
Yep.
this system could lend itself better to that type of shooter that expands into the shot, uses the expansion of the shot, whether due to a hinge, a tension, to get that shot to fire.
Yep,
Right?
100%.
And Bo and I both shoot a hinge, and we both shoot a cable stop bow.
Yeah.
And I'm 100% in
I think
agreement
we've
with
both
Bo.
tried bows with limb stops.
And I couldn't. What it comes down to is your hold again, right? The
Yep.
hold pattern. And when I'm looking at when I'm trying to articulate this, what I see my pins doing, the pin movement is different. Is very different on these two types of bows.
Yep.
When you have a finished product and you're shooting or aiming on a target,
Yep.
because as you pull into that back wall, what's happening is if you do look at the draw force curve as they peak up and they go down, it starts to build back up. You're adding resistance, and anytime you add a resistance or more weight, you're usually actually tightening up a hold, right? You're
Yeah.
making it smaller, you're making
Yeah.
it tighter.
Yep. Less of a just
Empty
a
float.
Empty float. Yep.
Not to say you can't get that with a cable stop.
Yeah.
I mean a limb stop bow.
We're not in any way, shape, or form saying that one stop is
No.
drastically better than another. They're both great systems.
It's more understand your shooting style, because I've had friends that shot limb stop bows great, and then they wanted to change brands and go into a cable stop bow, and they didn't shoot it as well, and it's mostly because of the style of shooter they
And
are.
what I would suggest for a lot of you out there as well, if you already have a bow that has both options, and some bows do. Some bows you can run a limb stop and a cable stop together independently. Try it all.
Yeah.
Try if you already have that bow and you've been shooting it with limb stops for a year. Put the cable stops in it, pull the limb stops off, and try it. Because you may find that one lends itself better than the other.
And even accuracy-wise, because it's not so much necessarily just the feel, maybe even the feel and just getting your shot to go off is smoother,
Yeah.
or it's more consistent, and maybe it translates into accuracy.
Yeah.
One more thing that I want to touch on here, as we start progressing into new setups. You go into demo, shoot a new bow, you want to get a feel for stuff. Obviously, like I said, these are some of the features, some of the things that we try to teach the shooter, the new shooter or existing shooter, and help them walk them through their decision-making process. The holding weight of a bow is very important, and that's going to lend itself into the next topic. The difference that you got here is both systems can be modified slightly for holding weight, right? Some have different modules. Some with the limb stop, you can rotate the limb. The thing is and again, certain bows lend themselves better to certain style releases, in my opinion. That's an opinion, but I think most of us are on the same opinion.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Here's another characteristic to think about. If you like a tension style release, a pull through, right? That Stanislavski perfect, that tension
the perfect
release,
resistance, the element,
that type
Carter
of release,
Revolution.
I've seen, because we've been running a ton of people through our workshops with those classes and setting the releases up to their bows. Typically, what you see with a tension style release, I think it's recommended you check your holding weight, right?
Check the holding weight of the bow.
For example, if you're drawing a 70-pound bow, 80% let off cam, you're only holding 14-ish, 15 pounds, right?
Yep.
You set that tension release to go off about 17, 18 pounds, in that range, depending.
Depending upon the person.
And depending on the limb style, the style of stops on the bow. A cable stop style bow, you can set it in that 2.5 to 4 pound range over usually as a starting point.
Yeah.
In that, and obviously as the poundage is lower, then obviously you're not going to give it as much of an increase. But I've noticed on a limb stop bow, you almost have to set it 4 to 5 pounds heavier to start, because as soon as you hit that back wall, when you see what a draw force curve as it peaks, dips into the valley, with the limb stop, it builds quickly.
Yeah, incredibly quick. I mean, it's almost instantaneous.
You get back with the tension style release and you engage in your anchor point and you release that safety. If there's not enough tension on the spring to hold the holding weight, shot goes off, fires. What you're gaining with a limb stop bow is it builds poundage. Yeah. So in some cases, that's why I say a tension release actually lends itself easier to learn. I'll say that, right? Maybe it's easier to learn on a cable stop bow.
I think a lot of that has to do with how fast that poundage builds. It's a very gradual build, so you can feel you can feel the shot. You can feel it transition.
Correct.
Okay, from just your standard holding weight at full draw and at anchor, and then slowly feel that build as you're engaging the shot, engaging your shoulders in the shot. Where in a limb stop bow, because it builds so quickly, in my opinion, when I've tried it, I feel like as soon as I start trying to engage a shot, it's instantly gone, and I don't feel that transition, which makes it kind of, in my opinion, hard for me to learn because I can't feel it.
Yeah, and it's that one component that the stop is giving you that back wall feel, solid back wall, soft back wall, whatever.
I think realistically, guys that have been shooting for a long time with a limb stop, they shoot a cable stop bow and they're going to say it's soft.
Yeah.
When in all entirety, there's some cable stop bows out there that, in my opinion, have a very soft back wall, but most of them are more than adequate.
And here's the other thing to consider too. Obviously, you start talking about adding. There's things that you can do to modify a cable stop bow.
How it feels.
To see how it feels, and this is something that really I think we do a good job of, is trying to help explain people, is some of those characteristics, because the leverage point, which is a stop against the whatever component, the limb or the cable, obviously you have less variables on a limb stop bow. It kind of is what it is, right?
Yeah.
You've got the stop position to move to adjust it.
Yeah, advance the stop forward for more holding weight, back it off for less holding weight.
You
but
can
the
tweak,
wall itself will always be as hard.
Correct. I mean, you can tweak cam rotation slightly, but at the same time, and all that's you can affect your holding weight a little bit. But at the end of the day, you're still a limb stop bow, right?
Yep, always.
On the cable stop bow, like we said, you can actually, you got some other leverage points.
Yep. They're aftermarket draw stops.
That's one thing, right? What about if somebody's looking for more holding weight, and let's say that the strands on a cable are 24 strands, you can get custom strings built at 26, 28 strands, and add tension, add lateral tension. So as it's pushing on that cable, you add strands to that. It adds strength and rigidity, and you've got more.
Harder back wall.
You got a harder back wall. You got more holding weight, right? Yeah. So there's things that you can do, but a lot of times people don't know how to ask the right questions, and they don't actually know what's causing this feel, or that what I'm seeing in my pins is causing that, right? This equals that, and that's where there's questions that are intimidating in archery,
Yeah.
and we would like to hopefully break down some of those issues by talking about them. If there are things that for us it comes second nature because we know we've worked on it, we know how to tweak our own system, and we build our own bow to our own personal liking. At the same token, if you don't know how to get from point A to point B, you know that something's not right. There's things in a bow, on a brand new bow. Nothing wrong with a brand new bow, right? It's supposed to be perfect
Fresh out of the box.
right?
Yep.
But we'll sit and monkey on things and tweak it and add some rotation, or maybe one stop's advanced a little bit more than the other, or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
There's things you can do to modify that back wall feel. And go ahead, Bo, go ahead and wrap up with the last kind of topic on this to close out this episode.
Yeah, I mean, well, kind of going back to adjusting the bow and how it feels, I don't remember the last time I've grabbed a bow fresh out of a box and just set it up and shot it that way.
Yeah.
I've always changed something.
Sure.
And it's because I do know what I'm looking for in the field. Now, for guys out there that don't know 100% what they're looking for, obviously, like I said, if you have a bow that has both stops, use both stops. Try them both. In some instances, maybe on your next set of strings, if you have the ability, add a couple strands. If you're going to do a custom set, or the possibilities are endless. I mean, you can short. We didn't even say it. Talk about it, but in some bows that use cable stops, if you want more holding weight, you can short peg it.
Yep.
Which I'm not a huge fan of. Phil's done it in the past, and it's worked well for him.
But I've done it on a lighter poundage bow, like on a 60 to 65 pound target bow, that I wanted that certain feel. Because I personally, my hunting bow that I set it up for a specific feel on the back end that's directly related to my holding weight.
I do the same.
And
That's why a lot of the times my hunting bows have been getting kind of higher and higher in poundage.
As let-off has been getting
as
higher,
the let-off's been getting higher, yeah, without doing like a drastic alteration to the bow, I've just kind of, now I'm not going to say that shooting more draw weight doesn't suck sometimes.
Yeah,
I've got a couple, 80-pound bows. Some of them are drawn a little heavy, and at the end of the day, sometimes it just you shoot that bow. Eventually, it gets to the point where it's just not as fun. But the holding weight is what I was looking for, and it really bumped up my accuracy. And I would rather deal with a little bit more draw weight personally to have the hold where I need it to be and have the accuracy that I want.
And I'm going to be. I've said it before. I think I wrote it in that first booklet I wrote with Targeting Buck Fever. Your holding weight is a direct correlation, or one of the issues that actually can cause some target panic anxiety issues if it's too high. And not only that, from a stabilization standpoint, like I said, as we get further into this topic and this discussion in regards to build and feel and what causes on the setup end, what causes something on the next progression or the finished end on the aiming or the accuracy, more holding weight is better in my opinion. And what I mean by that is more let off is not necessarily a good thing. You see some of these bows coming out at 85 to 90% let off. I personally think that's a bad thing for accuracy.
Yeah.
And you feel the same way.
Yeah, we can talk about that on the next.
Yeah. So we'll get more into that in depth, but like I said, just to understand some of the terminology, some of the things to be considering as bows start coming out, because we're excited. Like I said, some of the bows have started to come out. Yep. More will be coming out here in the next few days to weeks. And we'll definitely dive into some of the new builds, some of the features, and talk about some of the new technologies, right?
Yep.
As we get geeked out on that. But let's go ahead and close out this. And once again, we're always fueled by gummy bears. So anybody that wants to get in our good graces and maybe get a question answered on the show, I'm not saying you can bribe us, but gummy bears might be a good way to get your question up there. So thanks for checking us out, and we'll see you on the next episode.